Hello, and welcome to Musings from the Mystics. I'm Marnie.
And I'm Natalie. We are your guides on this crazy and sometimes tumultuous journey we call the human experience.
Each episode will share our musings about the current energetic climate,
how we're navigating these times,
and tips to help you get the most out of your journey.
So join us to be awakened, empowered,
and expand into conscious action. So hello, and welcome back to Musings from the Mystics.
It's been a while.
It's been a month. And we would love to know how you're feeling about that. Have you missed us? Did you enjoy the break? Were you looking forward to it? Please let us know. Because it's been a while, we have many topics to discuss today. So the plan is that we're going to do them in segments and have a little musical interlude in between so that if you missed listening on a weekly basis, you can listen to one digestible piece and then come back to it. Because I think, no bias at all, but I think the information we provide is really useful. And I know for me, I have a limit to how much I can absorb before it's just going in one ear and out the other, and I'm not paying attention anymore. I'm distracted by other things. And so that is the reason for the segmentality of this particular podcast.
Yeah, and not even tuning out, but if you listen to the whole thing and you want to go back to it, there's breaks in between. You can listen for the music and be like, oh, this is the part where I want to hear.
Actually, in the comments, I'm going to put the segment titles and the time.
Oh, there you go.
In the information below, so that if you wanted to come back, you could skip to that place. Trying to make it easy for you.
Yay!
Right? So, we titled this one, thank you to Natalie. She came up with this fantastic title. I'm all about alliteration, if you know me. Downloads and dialogues. I love it. And so I thought we could talk a little bit about how we receive information. That happens to be our first topic of, are you receiving the messages being sent to you? And so I thought it might be helpful for us to talk about how we receive messages. I typically call it downloads, or I call it channeling. How about you?
I call it, a lot of times I just say messages, like I got this message. And it's very interesting because one of my sisters says breadcrumbs. And I like that too, because she's like, it's not the whole piece. It's something to lead you in a direction. It is like a breadcrumb, like, oh, okay, this could lead you into that. Right. So I typically just say, like, I got this message, whether it be from my higher self, my guides, anyone else that was giving me a message that resonated, that I can tell it's a personal message for me.
Yeah, I like breadcrumbs. I use puzzle pieces because to me it's, a puzzle piece is only a very small part of the very large picture. So that's very much how I think. And I'll say nuggets sometimes too.
Yeah.
So yeah, I love that. The point is, it doesn't really matter what you call it.
No.
As long as it's something you're comfortable with. And I think that's important. So, for a long time, I didn't use the word channeling. Well, one, because I didn't realize that's what was happening. And two, I think that can be scary for some people, or be a little off-putting. Like, what does that look like? I had in my mind what channeling looked like, which is why I didn't know I was channeling, because it didn't look like that. And of course, it's still channeling. I'm just a conscious channel, and it looks different for everyone. And so finding that resonance that works for you of how you're receiving messages, I think is really important.
It is. And there are a lot of people out there who will say, like, oh, I can't do it. I'm not gifted with that.
Right.
And
it's not a gift, actually, people.
It's not. It's you're born with it. It's there. And it's like anything else. The more you practice it, the more you're going to be able to use it, hear it, see it, whatever it may be for you.
Yeah. I think it's, practice is an interesting choice of words. I would say the more you pay attention and follow through are the keys, which is, I guess, practicing. But, I think our guides will get quiet. It's already a whisper, but they get really quiet if you never pay attention, if you never follow through on the information you're given. It feels more out of reach
Yes.
then it does. But the more you do practice, the more you listen, the stronger that becomes.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And like I was thinking of meditation, like the people who say I can't meditate. Like meditate to me is a practice. You have to do it for several days and try to get into that space. And that's where I'm thinking of the practice.
Yeah.
Like and once you're in that space, you can typically hear messages or downloads or
Right.
whatever we want to call them.
So that's interesting that you say that, because I think that may be true for a lot of people. For me, it is not in that space, right? And so let's talk about how do you receive messages? How do I receive messages? So that I think it's important that people understand there is not one way, and it is not a particular thing, so that there is an openness to being able to hear and receive when you realize, oh, this may be coming completely different than my expectations, which is a whole nother topic.
Right.
Right. And how I can maybe start to open up to ways that it's showing up. So for me, I get a lot of messages, of course, when I'm in the shower and cannot possibly write or record. So it's funny, a lot of my memos on my phone are dripping wet. I've just stepped out of the shower and I start recording the thoughts coming through. And of course, I lose things because it's not in the moment. I need a waterproof recorder in my shower.
Yes, you do.
Or also when I'm doing other things, it's usually for me, unless I'm asking a specific question, my downloads. So when my higher self is talking to me and dropping in information like these subjects, it pops in. It's like I'm doing something innocuous, like making my lunch, or doing something, moving something from one room to another room, and suddenly I have this idea. So for me, it looks like suddenly something pops in. It's not a train of thought. It's not a logical progression of, what do I think I need to do about this? And then that happens, and then, you go step by step until finally I have an answer. It doesn't look like that at all. It's a sudden, immediate idea, concept, thought, subject, I need to talk about this, right? And as I'm talking, the information is just pouring out. Which is very different than like sitting down, meditating, and asking for an answer. Now, I can go into journey space and get answers, but that isn't how my inspiration and these kinds of things show up. How about for you?
And for me, it's different at different times. We were actually just having a conversation when I first got messages from like ancestors. It wasn't my guides. It wasn't my higher self. It was an ancestor or a close family friend who was trying to communicate with me. To get my attention, I smelled smoke.
Oh, yeah.
Like burning something. It was cross between like cigarettes, which I despise the smell of them. It makes me nauseous. And like electrical fire kind of
yuck.
thing. Yeah, it was totally. And for like 2 weeks, I was like roaming around my house saying to my husband and my son, like, do you smell something burning? Do you smell? And it took me a while to figure it out that, somebody's trying to communicate with me. And it actually took, again, my sister who said, did you ever think like somebody's trying to get your attention? And I was like, oh. And then it clicked. And then, so I don't get messages that way every time, but somebody that I'm not expecting, I guess, to get my attention. And I was like, can you give me a different smell? Can you make it oranges? Can you make it something different, please? And they did oranges once. And then they were like, that doesn't get your attention. We're going to leave it as this terrible smell that you don't like because it gets your attention.
So once you get the smell, then what do you do?
So I typically will like stop whatever I'm doing, close my eyes and say, okay, I'm ready for you. Who's here? What do you want? Kind of thing.
What's the tea?
I'm not always like, oh, hi, nice to meet you. What would you? No.
Have you noticed it's never convenient?
Right. Exactly.
I think that's key. If your download is convenient, is it a download or is it a thought? I don't know.
Right. And so, and I actually, when I first started, I had to turn it off. I had to say, look, I appreciate you being here. I understand you have a message for me. I need to go to bed. Leave me alone. I am glad to hear your message at a time that's convenient for me. And I think that's one of those boundary things that you can set. And every now and again, like I'll get the smoke. I'm like, I'm not ready for you right now. Can't do it right this minute. And with that kind of communication, they're willing to wait. But when it's guides, it's like, for example, the other day I was, I had done a meditation. I had gone to the 7th plane, dimension, whatever you want to call it. And after that, I got a clear message from my guides, go for a hike. And I was like, I don't want to go for a hike. It's hot out.
It was like 90 degrees that morning. It was so humid.
It was. And I was like, I don't want to go for a hike. And it was relentless. Go for a hike. Go for a hike. Go for a hike. I'm like, okay, fine. I'm going to go change my clothes. No, don't change your clothes. Just go for a hike. And I went for a hike. I was like 5 feet in the woods and it was nonstop. Like all these messages that I needed to hear. And I was like, why do I have to go to the woods? And my message was, you're not distracted. You can hear us clearly. And it's important what we have to tell you. So we needed you in this space. So sometimes it happens like that too. Like if I was home, the doorbell would have rang or the phone would have rang and
Distraction City.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that was the thing for me. And I do get better messages when I'm out in nature, not distracted.
It's interesting when you said relentless. When I'm working with a client and they have information that's coming through, sometimes it's information that helps me and isn't necessary to discuss, or it's something I can tell them afterwards. But when it becomes relentless, it's repeated over and over and over again, I know then that it's something we need to talk about because it's going to open a doorway. It's going to create an understanding or an awareness, and it's important because it's coming up. Maybe it's to be released. Maybe it's to discover something new. So even for us and I would say I have been channeling my whole life. I have been receiving messages. I just didn't know that's what it was.
Right.
I didn't know that the reason I knew stuff was I just thought I knew stuff, right? But it was because I was receiving channeled messages. But even that, it comes differently all the time, right? Even for me, who is used to it, it comes in different ways. And I think the important piece is to be open to how whoever wants to talk to you, because we're talking another realm, right? We're talking about our higher self that doesn't exist in this plane, in this dimension. We're talking about guides who are on all kinds of other dimensions. Right. Source, spirit, God, angels, whatever, like that's all different. So how they're going to show up is going to be different.
Right.
How they can communicate with you depends on how open you are in any given moment to what they have to say and the frequency they're transmitting on.
Well, and I want to make this point too, because this just recently happened to me, and I think it's a good thing to let people know, is we're all born with it. Everybody can do it. It's not something that somebody who's, I'm doing air quotes, spiritually gifted. It's not only those people that can get these messages. However, I just discovered that when I was little, like under the age of 10, that I was getting these messages or having this experience and it frightened me. Not that somebody necessarily planned to frighten me, but it frightened me and I blocked myself off from it. And so to get my attention and to get on this path, they had to essentially hit me over the head to say, hey, we're here. We're not going to scare you. We're friendly.
Yeah.
Pay attention to us. But there's that part of it too. Not that you have to be scared, but you know, I could have maybe been doing it my whole life, but I did get scared not having a clue what it was and blocked it.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up because I think that's true for most people. Either they were scared themselves by that occurrence or they shared it with a family member who quickly squashed. We don't do that. We don't talk about that. No, that's not, you didn't, right. That's or your imagination.
You're right. You're making it up.
Your imaginary friend that's not really there. You're making it up, right? It gets diluted minimally or completely blocked when we're children. And so that's something to sort of go inward and discuss, go back into your memory. Did you have a childhood friend? Did you when you prayed at your bedside, if that's what you did you hear things, but mom or dad said, no, that's not really happening, honey.
Right.
Or did you scare yourself, right? Maybe you had an encounter. You saw a spirit and it scared you half to death. So when you can discover those things, it will unlock that door.
It will unlock that door. And it's a good thing. And not only that, if we get back to how we get some of these messages, because I've got lots of life experiences for you guys out there, because I've been feeling it the past couple months. The other day, I went home and I was sort of talking about a client with my husband, but no details, obviously. There's confidentiality involved, but kind of giving a gist of what happened and that I wasn't comfortable with what happened. And my husband gave me this message, which was delivered in the worst way possible. And it was snarky, and it felt like it was, I'm throwing this back in your face because you say these things to me. But when I went for that hike in the woods, my guides were like, no, we asked him to give you that message. That was from us. His delivery just basically sucked.
So what was the message you were going to share with us?
So the message is that we all have the ability to go into different dimensions. We all have that ability to talk to all these different people. And the fact of doing something spiritually, like holding space or walking in different dimensions or going to different planes, whatever you want to call it, does not have to be so draining. However, the reason why we get trained is for them to teach us how to be human beings instead of human doings. And so some of that draining stuff is a little bit of a belief. Now, yes, if you're not used to it, it is going to be draining and it can be overwhelming. But it was kind of like the message was, you can do this. Anybody can do this. And that's basically what my husband was saying, but he was like, why do you think you can't do this? Or, and I'm putting that spin, but he was like, you always tell me I can do anything I want. Why can't you do it? Like, why do you think you can't do it? Why do you have limitations? Again, a good message, but I turned it off because of his delivery.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. I think definitely we receive messages through, relationships.
Yes.
Through the reflection of behavior from other people. I think those are probably the hardest. And they may not be considered messages or downloads, right? They're more lesson based, but sometimes they are messages. Like in that instance, they're messages. But we definitely can receive, and I think this is where the higher self really talks to us, and that reflected relationship or mirrored actions or conflicts or when the same challenges keep arising for us. I definitely think that's the higher self at play.
It is, and we have to notice them. We have to step back and say, okay, you're showing me this. Why are you showing me this? Even with my husband, had I stepped back and not completely closed down with the attitude that I felt like he was giving me with saying it, I could have said, yeah, you're right. Like, that's a truth. It's not even though I don't like the way you're saying that is a 100% truth, because it's what I tell everybody. It's right. What the client, you can find it in any book. It's what we're all telling everybody is, you can do anything and everything you want. You just have to figure out how to do it from within.
Right.
Instead of without.
I would say, had he not said it in that snarky way that triggered you, that you may have gone in one ear and out the other. Yeah, I know that. But it wouldn't have landed. But because it triggered you and you have the ability to stop and self-reflect, you're like, oh, okay, this is a belief. I don't need to have this, right? So I think that's a great example of how we learn from conflict or being triggered, that it's an opportunity to receive something deeper and more expanded.
Yes.
For our growth.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I just used the word you just said, belief, which just reminded me, BS.
Oh, yeah.
BS, which stands for belief system. However,
also bullshit.
Also bullshit. Like, the two go hand in hand, because typically, and we're not saying your beliefs are wrong. That's not what I'm saying here, but it's a belief that you can go into and say, why do I believe this? Does it resonate, kind of thing. And we've talked about that before.
Yeah, sure. Belief systems either work for you or they don't work for you. If they're holding you back, then they're not working for you.
Right. And are these messages that we're talking about in this delivery trying to get you to shift that belief system? So.
Yeah. So another thing I just want to talk about when channeling. So I'm an Aquarian. I'm a triple Aquarian. I am in my headspace all the time. Right. Did you say 4-time Aquarian? Oh, because Venus is also an Aquarius. Yes. Actually, if you look at my chart, the whole Aquarius section in that pie chart is full of things.
It is. I was just holding up the number 4 with my fingers as she's talking. I'm like, it's more than triple, right. But we'll just go with triple.
So I'm a fixed air sign. I am clearly in my headspace. My brain is always going. Now, that doesn't mean I don't say that in the sense that my head is always running the show, because I don't think that's true at all. I very much allow my intuition to guide me. But my head, it never shuts off. My brain never shuts off. It's always thinking. So another way that I allow myself to get out of that thinking space is by doing things like my coloring app, which I know I've mentioned before. When I'm sitting on my coloring app, and I'm thinking about colors and numbers, right? So my brain is occupied. I get enormous amounts of information for myself. My guides talk to me. I get answers and resolutions. I get direction. I get ideas. Like, all these things happen when I can give my brain something to occupy itself, which is not complicated or challenging or difficult. It's not trying to solve a problem. I'm literally coloring pictures on my phone. But that gives me space. I think the same thing is true with the shower. For instance, I know a lot of people get information when they're near water. Is you're busy, you're showering, you have a routine, you're doing your routine, you're occupied. And so information can come through. So I think it's important to find ways, if you are someone who's in your headspace or has a particular personality and how you move through the world, how can you put yourself into a different space temporarily and see if that opens that channel for you, allows you to hear in another way. Not everyone can sit and meditate. I don't just sit and meditate. I do journeys, because being quiet is not something my brain will do. So I listen to guided things so that my brain is occupied with what they're saying, and then I can receive.
Right. And we've talked about this before too, but it goes back to the same sort of thing, like the runners that get in a zone when they run, the people doing something that's physically active, but they still get into that, like they're focusing on their breathing, or they're running or whatever they're doing, whatever, like swimmers, all those kinds of things, same thing. Just get into the space however you can.
Yeah. I think that's why creativity is so key, because you get into a rhythm of whether it's painting or doing music or dancing or needlework or cooking. You're in that zone, and that creative space is open. It allows information and ideas to come through.
It's also, and this is a little off topic, but I want to kind of say this for everybody out there. It's also like, when you're in the thick of it and having maybe a trauma response, that distraction piece might allow you to shift your perspective and get a new idea too. Like, I sometimes tell my clients, like, start counting by 2s, or start like doing your twos addition table, 2 + 2, just to kind of get out of your head at that moment. So
let's be clear, when we're talking distractions, we're not talking about scrolling on social media.
No.
Or just sitting and watching television. Those types of distractions are not conducive to communication and awareness. They are meant to keep you occupied and stuck in those paradigms of not enoughness. So that is not the kind of distraction we're talking about. We're talking about from the mundane, everyday, human adulting crap that we have to do.
I would agree with that. And again, however your message comes, just kind of step back and say, is it a message for me? is this my ego taking over? Is this fear, or is this something that resonates, that feels like it's truly for me from a higher place?
And listen to the first gut instinct answer, because once your brain starts negotiating, you're off track, right? Because the brain's immediately going to come in and be like, no, you're crazy, you're making this up, it's a fantasy, whatever, right? The brain is going to distract you in a different direction. It's that first initial instinct, and you'll know. And you may feel a little crazy, which I hate that expression, but that's the dialogue we use these days. You may feel like, that's nuts. Like that can't be right? But
and instead just go with
it, right? You know, like this did not come from a thought process. This dropped in.
Right.
Which is why I call them downloads. Another way that we haven't discussed is dreams. So a lot of people get information and understanding through dreams. Dream interpretation is something I kind of geek out about. I think it's fun. It's that research kind of aspect of myself. I have all these dream dictionaries, and I look up the symbolism of each and every piece. I'll give you an example. One time I had this dream about, I was on a bus, and I was with a bunch of people, and we were riding around in a square, and I can't remember the other things that happened. But, you can't really look up a dream dictionary and go, riding on a bus in a square, right? So I looked up bus, what does that mean? And I know there was a circle, some sort of circle representation, but also a square. So I looked up square, what does a square, the symbolism of a square. And so I broke down the dream into all these little pieces and facets. And there was like 10 different things that I could kind of break down. And then I wrote it all out, like this means this and this means this. And I took what made sense to me, what felt right to me, what resonated with me. So there's usually many meanings behind one thing. So I always take yes, this feels relevant to me in this moment. And I wrote them all down, and then I could kind of read, oh my gosh, here is this understanding, right? But it took all those pieces and components. Now, you don't have to go as far as I do as the researching, but what does that mean to me? If I think about what does a square mean, and what is riding on a bus? What does that symbolize, and how does that make me feel? You can begin to decode and understand the information that you're receiving.
And sometimes it just takes telling your friend what you've been dreaming about.
That's true.
And it's funny because Marnie and I just had this a couple days ago. I had a dream one night that I was in a storm, and I jumped in the water, and I was in I don't even know that it was an ocean, but I was swimming with a sea turtle. The next night there was a bar, and it was on fire. I don't remember what I dreamed the next night, but the next morning I pulled an earth card.
Because I said, well, you've got earthquakes and tornadoes left.
So I'm guessing air is going to be next. But I clearly, after Marnie said, like, the elements, I got that message that was like, yes, you need to get back in touch with the elements kind of thing. That. So... And that was just by me saying, oh my God, I had the most bizarre dream last night. And Marnie was like, oh yeah, you're getting all the elements. And then, of course, I got the earth card. So
that's so funny. Was it last night or the night before? I had a dream that I got a report and I passed. There was like a check mark. And I can't remember any of the details of the dream. I only remember I got this report and I had passed. I was done. And I woke up going, cool. I don't know what I just passed. Awesome. I'm so excited. Like,
yay for me.
Yay for me. I made it. I'm done. Fantastic. So I feel because of my life, there was some sort of up-leveling, some sort of spiritual, like I had learned something, I had let something go, it was completed, and that felt really good, especially given the energy that we're in right now. Now, I could, if I wanted to get all up in my headspace about it, I could be like, oh, I was being graded, and what was I doing? Like, I could get really lost in the minutia of it. But that's not how we interpret information. We want to go, what was my feeling? My feeling was, this is fantastic. And so I went with that. I didn't overanalyze. I didn't like go into like, I just let it go.
Right, because we all have that ability. Even like the storm, because Marnie said, that doesn't seem safe when
she jumped into the ocean.
She was like, were you on a boat? And I'm like, yeah. And she's like, well, what? And I'm like, oh, I jumped into the ocean. And she's like, that doesn't feel safe. And I was like, I was perfectly safe. It was the best choice for me. But I didn't go into the catastrophes, even the fire with the bar. Like, I didn't say like my world's burning down. It was more of a like, oh, okay, I can work with the elements, and this can be cool, and this can be fun, kind of thing.
Yeah. So that, I think, does come with practice, right? Interpreting, understanding the information you're getting, and it's important to stay open, and in that state, as I always say, of questioning and curiosity, so that I can better understand what's happening in my life. How does this apply? Maybe this information I'm receiving doesn't make any sense in this moment. So you kind of just let it linger.
Right. It will come. You will get an answer.
When you need to understand it, that puzzle piece will snap into place. And you'll be like, oh, there it goes. I'll give you another example of this. So I had an astrology reading with Maria Alejandra the other day. I talk to her monthly. I love her dearly. I will put her link in the bio again, or in our thing. And she talked about I'm coming into this phase of needing to embrace Taurus energy. Now, if you know anything about astrology, and you tell an Aquarian, a really, really, really deep Aquarian, that they need to embrace the chop wood, fetch water, eat the grass, boring Taurian energy, they do not respond well. They do not respond well. So of course, she talked me around, and she's like, well, this is what it means. And I started, as I was talking to Natalie about this, and other people started to understand how I've actually been doing that all along. Mm-hmm. I remember one day someone said during an event here, oh, are you an earth sign? And I was like, no, I am not an earth sign.
No.
I was very offended. Which is ridiculous. There's no reason to be offended, but I was offended. And she's like, because your home is so welcoming and warm, and it's, I'm all about textures and touch and beauty, which I found out are Taurian things. And I was like, oh. So then we're talking, and I was like, oh my God, I have a guide who is a Minotaur. I literally have a statue of a bull on my altar and have for years.
I didn't even remember.
And I was like, oh, there's the bull. Then I remembered back when he came into my life that I was also showing at a gallery called the Pleiadian Gallery in Durham, which their symbol is a bull because they're in Durham, Bull City. And then the other day, as I was reclaiming one of the rooms in the house, I came across this picture of, I don't know if it's just a woolly cow with horns or if it's actually a bull, but it doesn't matter. It's a picture my daughter happened to leave behind, and it's a bull. And I'm like, okay. So when I say puzzle pieces eventually snap into place, and the nuggets or the breadcrumbs, when you start to like go back and go, oh, yeah, this has been coming. Okay, I see it. And then when I realized my frequency for me is beauty, not love or joy or whatever.
Right.
I was like, oh, okay. So I've been embracing this all along. So when we say, just let it float, the nuggets that come in, the information that comes in, let it be there, and eventually the pieces will snap into place if we allow them to. If I hadn't had such a viscerally negative reaction,
right,
to the Earth energy or Taurus thing, right, I may have picked up on it a little bit faster.
Right. And I'm working on finding my copy of Ferdinand.
Oh yes,
for Marnie. I haven't found it yet, but he is not the typical bull, so they all don't have to be alike. Right. So that was the other part of that.
But then I decided to do a journey and like, let me go meet the bull. And so I did. I went and met the bull, and the bull's name is Dan. My bull is Daniel, not Ferdinand, but his name is Daniel. And we had a lovely little chat, and I was like, okay, now I understand. So it's important when you're receiving information to let it float in your energy field, play with it, explore it, date it.
Yeah.
What's it
totally?
What's it like? Let me get to know you. Let me understand you. How is that already showing up? Maybe how are the things that I'm wanting, visioning for my life actually already in alignment with what's coming in or this information that I'm getting? Rather, I think we so automatically resist and push away anything new. People are so afraid of change. And I'm just, you know what? Buckle up, Buttercup, because that's all life is about. Is change.
No, and an automatic for that is we think people are judging us too.
And who cares?
Like, right, exactly. And it doesn't matter. But like, you got offended by somebody asking if you
totally
had an
did.
earth sign. So there's that.
And I love this person dearly, and I don't know if she listens to the podcast, but no, that was such a beautiful moment because it was a golden nugget,
right? It was a catalyst
that I just hadn't picked up yet.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So. I think that's all our different ways for getting messages, I'm going to say.
Yeah. So, if I think if you're looking to expand this ability, because we all have it, like Natalie said, everybody has the ability. You have to think about it like this. If we all have guides, of course we're going to be able to hear them.
Yeah. Why would
what
we
would
not?
be the point
right.
of
Why would
having
you
a
have
guide?
one? Right.
If you can't listen to them. What would be the point of having a spiritual connection of any kind, regardless of your belief system, if you can't communicate with them? What's the point?
Right.
So, of course you can. If you're wanting to explore that, one of my empowerment books called Spiritual Connection Empowerment Tool, that might be helpful to work through. I've done a workshop many times about like being able to communicate with your guides. But also Natalie and I are pretty experienced at this. So if you're looking for a coach or somebody to kind of like help you work with that energy, we're available.
Definitely.
So this segment is a follow-up to the stages of Ascension. And I wanted to talk about this subject, basically of defining Ascension, growth, transformation experiences. And this goes along with my very passionate feeling about our language.
Yes. Yes.
And what we're saying and what we say, how we define what we're experiencing really paves the road ahead. I think it really can pigeonhole you. It can direct you in a direction that you aren't actually needing to go in or want to go in, and it can derail the growth process. So, one, it's different for everyone. What you're feeling at any given moment, because literally it can change moment to moment. And how you're experiencing the incoming energy, the solar flares, the up-leveling, all of that stuff, how you experience it will be different individually. So I think it's really important that we not jump on the bandwagon of everyone says, I'm tired, I'm busy, I'm exhausted, right? You hear that and it's like it's like a competition of who's more exhausted, who's more busy, and nobody's giving out medals for that shit.
No.
You're not.
No.
You gain nothing, but you do hurt yourself by jumping onto that bandwagon. So I thought it might be interesting to talk about, the words that I'm hearing used all the time and what they mean definition-wise. And then, are you really feeling that? So like the first set is exhausted, tired. Exhausted means to drain of strength or energy, to use or consume completely, to deprive wholly of useful or essential resources. So, are you actually exhausted? Instead of saying that, because I catch myself, there are times when I'm like, oh my God, I have nothing left. I'm so exhausted. But that isn't actually true. Right? Maybe I feel physically tired, but mentally and emotionally I'm good. So to say I'm exhausted, too extreme of a word. And if I say I'm exhausted, then what happens? My body says, oh, I believe that. Okay. you have no energy, right? The gauge goes down and your tank becomes empty. And that's that, manifesting your reality kind of thing. And so be careful. Like, I will catch myself and I say, no, that's not how I'm mentally tired right now. I will, change it. So what does tired mean? Tired means fatigued, sleepy, weary, bored.
That's a good one.
Yeah. Interesting, right? So you think tired is, I don't have enough sleep, but it actually has a deeper meaning than that.
Yes.
There's some facets to that word. And maybe that's more accurate. You're tired.
Right.
I also use this phrase called tapped out. And it actually goes back to money. It's a phrase used when your bank account is empty.
Right. Originally, that's where it came from.
But it says very tired with no energy. Now, for me, this phrase includes physically, mentally, and emotionally tired. When I say I'm tapped out, I have nothing left. And I retreat. Mm-hmm. I say, okay, I'm empty. I have no brain capacity. I have no emotional capacity. I have no physical capacity. I am going to get in bed. I don't care that it's 6 o'clock at night. I'm tapped out. I'm going to rest, right? So I think it's really key in our growth process to recognize what are we actually feeling and to accurately describe it. And I don't mean for other people, because again, who really cares what other people think? But to accurately describe it for ourselves. Because our body believes everything we think, say, and do.
It does. And it's funny, as Marnie's talking, I'm sitting here thinking of my mirror, what we were just talking about in the last segment. But I tend to talk in absolutes. And I don't mean anything by them, essentially. But I use the word always, never,
ever.
Like those are some of the words, and I'm having an aha moment as she's sitting here talking.
Is that what your expression was? I was like, she has something to say. I don't know what it is.
She does, because it was like that puzzle piece that just snapped and was like, oh, okay, because my husband wonderfully delivered an unpleasant message about absolutes just the other day. Like, you said always to me, I always do this, and I do not. That's why I got so mad, because I don't always do this. And I think that was a message for me to pay attention to my words.
Yeah.
And it goes along with these things of the exhaustion, the tired, the tapped out, because if you're putting an adjective like always in front of it, or that descriptor of I'm never going to be XYZ, you're emphasizing these words too. So not only
it's like to the 10th magnitude,
you're
or something.
compounding it exponentially across the universe. So I think that's a be careful. And you're allowed to be tired. We're not saying that either. We're not saying that you're not allowed to be tapped out or exhausted. But the overuse of these words.
Yeah. Make sure that's accurate.
Yeah, because classic law of attraction, you're putting that out there, you're going to get more of that back.
Right.
Whatever
and all you're going to do is feel even more exhausted, right? So even if someone's like, how are you doing? Unless I really, really feel like this person would understand what I say when I say I'm exhausted or tapped out or tired, right? I will say, I'm great.
Right.
I actually won't go into that. For instance, it's the middle of the day. I still have 15 things to do. I don't want to go into that state of I'm exhausted, because I won't make it through the 15 things I have to do. Right. So I will think, okay, I'm feeling a little depleted. In what area right now? How can I replenish in this moment to continue through the rest of the day? And at the end of the day, I'm going to rest, because I am whichever adjective.
Right. And it could even be like Marnie the other day was like, I'm feeling it. And she went and got a sandwich and chips and a chocolate cake.
I did.
I'm not picking on her, but she knew she needed some energy for whatever she was going to do next. So and she didn't say like, I'm totally exhausted, I can't do anything else. She just said, I'm kind of feeling it right now. I know I need some help.
I needed food fuel.
Yes. And if you look at that way, like switch those words, okay, I'm starting to feel the drain, but I'm not totally drained. I'm starting to feel that. How can I help myself is a good way to switch it too.
For sure. Yeah. And maybe it's not tired or exhausted, maybe
Maybe you're hangry.
maybe you're angry. I totally get hangry. But maybe it's you need to put on your favorite song for a minute, right? If you're mentally exhausted, maybe you need your favorite song. Just to hear that lyric or that chorus and like, okay, I feel like I can, come back to center in this moment. Figuring out where you're feeling exhausted, tired, tapped out, depleted, whatever words are accurate to describe what you're feeling, understanding where that is. Is it mental, physical, emotional, spiritual? That's another one. And how can you replenish? And it's important to look at these things. Again, we talk so much about introspection and looking at self and being aware. And this is the being aware.
Yeah.
I'm feeling this. Okay. Is it this, or all three? Okay. What do I need to help myself? Just going with I'm exhausted and this is just the way it is and poor me. And like you go into that victim mode.
Ooh.
You're never getting out of that.
No, you're not.
The ascension, the growth, the transformation is not going to happen. So it's perfectly reasonable, logical, valid to feel any of those things. Just make sure however you're describing it, whatever you're buying, if you will, because the minute you say I am, you've bought it.
Right.
That it's accurate.
And it can be that you do need a nap. It can be go lay down and rest. We're not saying that there's anything wrong. Just figure it out instead of, oh my God, I'm so exhausted, but I still have to do X, Y,
But I'm going to do all these
right.
things, and I'm going to take the kids to this and go to this event that I didn't want to go to anyway, or whatever it is, right? No, don't do that.
Right. No.
I mean, the kid thing, you sort of have to do some things, but, see if you can find some support.
Well, yeah. And is it like that hard no? Is it I'm willing to compromise, or is it a straight yes? Like you get to have those choices too, even with the I'm exhausted and tired or whatever it is. You can have the and I'm willing to compromise and still do this. Mm-hmm. Or I'm not willing to compromise. I need to go to bed. Right. Sorry.
Yeah. Another group of words that's way overused. She's rolling her eyes.
I am rolling my eyes because I already hear the words in my head, right. And I already hear the people that say them.
Right. Anxious and anxiety. This one actually drives me a little bit over the edge. The actual meaning is full of mental distress because of fear of danger or misfortune. Mm-hmm. Right? So anxiety comes from projecting our thoughts into the future and worrying about the outcome.
Correct.
Which is useless.
Correct.
That activity is not helpful in any way. And because we have a medical paradigm that wants to give you a pill for everything and label everything, it is an overused word. And I think it's so easy to just go, oh, I'm feeling so anxious. Are you really? Maybe you're just nervous. Maybe you're excited. Maybe you do have some fear, right? But is it actually to the extreme of anxiety? So nervous means acutely uneasy or apprehensive. So I love there's this dichotomy, like acute is an extreme
right.
Uneasiness or apprehension, which is a much lesser degree.
Right.
So isn't that funny? There's a range within that word. Also highly excitable, right? So you could be nervous because you're excited about something.
Right. It could be a good kind of nervous.
It could be. And did you know that, and I think I've mentioned this before, the body does not know the difference between excited and anxiousness. The body interprets the mind interprets the body's experience of excitement and anxiety as the same.
And that's still fight or flight.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to say this, and I truly believe this, that most of our society is addicted to
Absolutely.
the fight or flight mode and the cortisol levels that brings.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, so fearful, dread or apprehension, right? Which, doesn't that feel so much less intense than what we think of fear as?
Yes.
Like, fear is terror. I
Fear,
think,
right, death.
Our
death,
mind goes to terror when we
Right.
think of fear versus dread or apprehension, right? So, better understanding, okay, I can fear something. It doesn't mean I have an anxiety problem or that I need medication or that it's the end of the world or my body needs to respond in a fight, flight, or freeze way. It means, oh, I have some fear about that. Okay, interesting.
Right. And fear can be a good thing too, but there's still a discernment that comes with it. For example, I don't know if I've ever mentioned it. Paul Selig, he channels his guides, and he's written a whole bunch of books, but I really like him. I really resonate with his words. But he has this thing that he talks about, like a tiger. It's logical and okay to be afraid of the hungry tiger, and therefore not put yourself in front of this hungry
Don't climb in the cage.
Right, don't climb in the cage. However, the discernment is, like, are you not going to go to the zoo because there's a tiger at the zoo? Like, there's that line, like, I don't want to put myself in front of the hungry tiger, but can I never go to a zoo because there might be a hungry tiger at the zoo? Like, it's the logical reasoning.
It seems so simple when you put it that way.
It does. But, like, I think we have to step back and look at some of those things. Like, yes, I should not put myself in the path of a hungry tiger, but, oh, look, I can go see him at the zoo where he's taken care of in some place that he's not going to get to me. They're two totally different things, but people equate them together. So, like, I'm afraid of all tigers now.
Right. Interesting. And the reason we're talking about this, and I think we've sprinkled this sort of subject matter in among many of our podcasts, but the ascension, growth, transformation process brings with it a smorgasbord, a buffet of experiences, including exhaustion, tiredness, nervousness, fear, anxiety, being tapped out, right? It is likely you're going to experience these,
some of this,
and more. In the discernment of what it is I'm experiencing and being careful with the words, it allows you to move through the experiences much easier because literally our DNA is upgrading. It's physically exhausting doing nothing sometimes because our bodies are upgrading. We have a massive amount of energy coming in that we've never experienced before. It is changing our structure, and that is tiring. You think about when, if you're a woman and have had a child, a growing child inside of you, you're not actually physically doing anything, but it's exhausting growing a human inside of you. It's akin to that, right? That we are changing, and that takes energy. It takes mental, emotional, spiritual, physical energy from the body. So to be feeling these things, also change can be scary. Wow. Like, wow, this thing I've dedicated my life to for the last 20 years doesn't, whether that be a relationship or a job or whatever, isn't resonating anymore. And there's a fear of loss and we want to grip and hold on to, and still we need to move through that. So yeah, you're going to feel all of these things. Just make sure what you're describing and how you're talking about it, especially to yourself, is accurate.
And remember that it doesn't have to last forever and be day in and day out.
Right.
That's the other thing. Like, you're allowed to be in that exhausted state, but when you rest or after you rest, okay, I feel better. And it's a good thing to make that distinction,
to state that as well.
Yes, I rested. Okay, and thank you for the rest. I do feel better now. Like, put that out in the world.
Yeah, let your body feel better.
Right. It's nice.
This seems like, well, to me, this is like, well, of course, this seems so simple. But I think we're so conditioned in society, and we want to belong. And so we fall into these habits of, we're all in competition for who's the busiest person, who's the most exhausted, who's the most anxious, who's on the most medication, who's the most miserable in a relationship,
Right.
who's right, like,
who's got the most diseases,
right?
Who's got
like, I mean, all of these things, and it's like, this is the not a good way to go, right? I mean, yeah, if that's the choice you want to make, but you're probably not listening to this podcast if that's the choice you want to make. Like, pick a different path. Pick a path that is going to be easier, because I can tell you right now, while this may seem like more work, quote unquote, to pay attention, you're doing work either way.
Right. Yeah.
You are in a working state regardless of which path you choose. Do you want it to be this way that is not serving you? Or do you want it to be in this way of growth and transformation and expansion and ascension? And, all those lovely flowery words that feel so good. But you know what those words mean? They all mean work. Growth, ascension, transformation, they all mean work. It's not some easy yellow brick road path. And if you even use that analogy, that yellow brick road was fraught with shit.
Yes, it was.
Like, that was not an easy path, right? There was flying monkeys and drawn to poppies and you name it.
Right.
All kinds of stuff going on. That is, it just, in the long run, that path leads to alignment with that resonance that you want to achieve in this life. Whereas the other path of working under constraints or paradigms or programming or conditioning of society gets you nowhere.
Right. And you honestly get to choose how easy or hard it is for yourself.
We have said that before, for sure. We get to
Yes.
choose, right?
Yes.
I get tapped out quite a lot often these days, and that is complete tap out, because I have engaged during the day. I've had to do a lot of peopling. I've been doing work. There's, mental, emotional things, all these things going on, and I have felt tapped out, and it's okay. I get in bed at 6 o'clock at night, I eat my dinner in bed, and I
Right.
I rest, whatever, because that's what I need. But it is so much better.
Yeah.
Like, because I'm in tune with what I need and not what somebody expects of me or what society expects of me.
Or what society is telling you need.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bingo.
Yes, definitely.
So the last thing in this subject is this idea of and I'm pretty sure I've brought it up before, because it has been a huge lesson for me. And I feel like if I'm experiencing this lesson, it's so that I can help others, work through it. Everything in my life has basically been that. And that is living in this paradoxical duality. We're in the age of Aquarius, which by its nature is paradoxical. Mm-hmm. It is this, and they are opposing, right? The ruling planet, the traditional ruling planet of Aquarius is Saturn, which is order and structure, and, it's very stable. The modern ruling planet is Uranus, which is destruction and chaos.
Yes.
And blowing things up, right? And so by Aquarian's nature, and this is the time that we're in, it is paradoxical. And so I have been learning to embrace personally this idea of and. I can be tired and also really joyful and happy. I can be mad and also excited or sad or in grief, or right. So the idea is that we can be exhausted and tapped out and also feel really fulfilled.
Right.
We can be working through trauma and, having this really challenging experience of healing some old wounds and still enjoy life. We don't have to wait, and there's not an either or, and society is very conditioned to this or that,
Yes.
right? It's one thing.
Yes.
And that isn't true. It's not true of human nature.
No.
I think at all. And so in this kind of relanguaging of how you're feeling, allow yourself to be great and also tired maybe.
Right.
Right? Allow that, adopt the and. Allow yourself to be more than one-dimensional.
Yeah.
That's a big one.
That's
really allow yourself to
huge.
be more than one-dimensional. Is that all you want? And if it is, great. You can stop listening anytime.
Right. Yeah. No, the and is a thing. And we talked about the but, the but word. So try replacing your buts with the ands and see what happens.
Yeah, when I learned that many years ago, and so when I'm writing and I start to write but, I will stop and go, can I say and? Can I rewrite this sentence to say and instead of but? And sometimes but is appropriate.
Yeah, it does.
But often I will rewrite something to say and versus but, because it stays in my mind all the time now. And yeah, I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah. I think that's a big thing. And I've actually had that a lot in dealing with my teenage son, who the other night was jumping up and down literally on the last nerve that I had. So I have tried to incorporate that and word very often.
Yes, I understand, and you have rules.
Yes.
I imagine it went something like that.
It definitely did. That's exactly how it went.
I love you. You have lots of freedom, and you have some rules.
Yes.
Get off my damn nerves.
Yes. Yes. Time for everyone to go to bed and rest. I've had enough of you today.
Yes.
And you're allowed to say those things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think the parting thing is be thoughtful and accurate about your own self-evaluation.
Yes. And the external words and the internal words. Not just how you put it out into the world, but even how you talk to yourself.
Mostly how you talk to yourself.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. Okay, so this last segment is, I'm calling it my my mystic mic drop, which may be overstating things, but it felt like that when it came in. When it downloaded, it felt like a really big message. And so the short version is this: whatever you receive, hold it with open hands.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So my thought process behind this is whatever you receive, whether it is material, emotional, lessons, or awareness, we want to hold it with open hands, because whatever we receive is going to change and go away at some point, whatever it is. In the case of material objects, let's say, okay, I receive this cherished gift or whatever, any possession, we can't possess it forever. We may lose it, we may break it, it may be stolen, or ultimately we're going to die and we don't own that thing anymore anyway, right?
Correct.
But while we own it, we can enjoy it, we can cherish it, we can make memories from it, with it, whatever it happens to be. And I'm talking about material things, not people in this moment. But when it leaves, we lose it, whatever happens to it. If we're not attached to the thing, we can still retain the memories, the cherished moments, the feelings. It's not about the thing.
No, it's not.
It's not about the thing. It's never about the thing.
No.
But, in this society, we hoard.
We do.
We're not taught to let go. We grasp, we clench, we hold on, and then our world is devastated when the thing goes. But we never owned it anyway, whatever it happens to be. So to take this further, the same goes for emotions and lessons. When you hold these with open hands, you can receive what is needed and let it move through. This eliminates the need to let go, right? I hear so many clients, I don't know how to let go. What does that mean to let go? And there's so much confusion around it. And if you're not grasping, hoarding, or holding on to it because it was meant to move through, we eliminate this whole struggle step of letting go, right? And then in the case of awareness, This is something that is meant to continually change and grow and expand. If you hold on to one level of awareness, you run the risk of getting stuck and halting your ascension process. So imagine if we held everything with open hands, how much less struggle, if any, we would experience, and how much more inflow we would feel.
You know, that's a really good point too, because we talk a lot to people about clearing space. And if you don't clear out some of the clutter, right. And I don't mean just material clutter, I mean emotional,
mental,
all of it. If you don't clear it out, you don't have space. So I think this is a beautiful point of, I just did it recently. Y'all know I love Disney. And I had Disney houses that I collected and that I have been collecting for years. But, and big but, I realized that I was collecting these houses because I thought I had to have the whole collection. Because somebody told me, oh, they're going to retire these and you're never going to be able to get them again. But there were ones that I didn't like. Like I had 100, we'll say 100 houses.
Wow.
And I'm going to say half of them I didn't really like. I didn't enjoy, but I bought them or asked for them for gifts because somebody was like, oh, if you don't have this, you don't have the whole collection. And then if you don't have the whole collection and they retire these, you're never going to be able to get them. And like, I bought into all that crap instead of saying like...
You were hoarding.
I was hoarding these houses. And instead of saying like, oh, I like this one, I really enjoy the way it looks, I'm going to keep this one, or I'm going to get this one, I got them all. And so at the end of Christmas season last year, I got rid of a lot of them. And I took each one down, because they were up, they were on display, I took it down. It's almost like I did hold it in my hands and say, what do I think about you? And there were several that I didn't even have to look at. I took them down, put them in the box. They went in the to-go pile because I never liked them to begin with. So I kept this, I'm going to call it crap, because I never really liked it anyway. Right. Like, why would you do that? And it was that fear that we talked about in one of the other segments, that somebody's going to have something that I don't have, or I'm not enough if I don't have this whole collection and it doesn't match.
So it became about societal expectations versus what actually resonated, brought you joy.
What exactly I liked. Yeah. So I had to go through that, and I've gone through, we live in North Carolina, obviously. We moved 4 years ago. And when we moved, I did the same sort of thing. Like, I did get rid of a lot of stuff, but even since then, I've gotten rid of more. Like, why do I need all this stuff? Because somebody told me that my home's not a home if I don't have all these things. Or my house is boring if I don't have all these things. And I totally bought into that. But you're right. If I would have just held them with the open hands and said, okay, thank you, it's nice, move on. And I actually got this message about the trees the other day too, which was very interesting. I recently developed this very strong connection with trees. I'm pretty sure I have been a tree at some point in time. And now that I had this connection, I was like revering them as they have souls, they're living, and I can't harm anything and I can't do anything to them. And I got this message that was, even Mother Nature burns us down. We have to be transformed into other things. And the words that I got were, you're not murdering us because we're never gone. We just transform. And it was, if you want to get rid of some trees, have a conversation with us and say, I love that you were here. I respect you. And I would like to change the space that you're in. And I got the message that they're going to say, yeah, go for it. And they're going to be okay with it. But it's that open hands that you're talking about. And also how we look at these things. Like, I was like, oh God, no, I was a tree. I can't, that's murdering you. Like, I mean, I had this whole moral dilemma going on in my head.
You were grasping onto that concept.
Because I can have a conversation with the tree. And I was feeling like if I cut down a tree, even I haven't had a fire in my fire pit, which I loved because of this too, because I was like, oh, I'm hurting. And they're like, we're already gone when we're cut down. We've already transformed. You're not hurting us by burning. Again, this whole moral dilemma, because I was holding so tight to
one understanding, one awareness.
Right. Exactly.
Whereas the trees gave you a new awareness.
Exactly.
That allowed you to
almost like I felt like the Lorax kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Like I'm not decimating the forest, the whole forest. I want to take down a couple trees so I can see the sky, kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Have a conversation and say, I love you. I appreciate you being here. Do you mind moving on?
Yeah.
And most times they're going to say, I mean, I guess somebody could be stubborn and say, no, I don't want to go. But it's a conversation.
Yeah.
So interesting.
Yeah. Oh, and you think about, if your hands are closed, you can't receive.
Right.
The fists won't receive anything, right? Or if they're overfilled, whatever you put into it is just going to fall off or overflow. And so I just thought it was such a beautiful metaphor. And this was a downloaded message that came in while I was showering, of course, jumping out with wet hands, right? Trying to record this idea, this concept, and then to expand on it with, how to look at it in different ways. But if you just, sit and you clench your fists, and how does that feel, right? Your hands are closed. How does that feel?
Limiting.
It feels like there's no exchange. Mm-hmm. But if you then put your hands together and you open them up, right, the energy shift that you physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually feel is palpable. It's tangible. Mm-hmm. And I think it would be such a beautiful way to move forward in life is to keep our hands open, and recognize how much less struggle we're going to go into and experience. And then the letting go process, there's no letting go, it's letting flow.
Yes. Yes. And it's that old paradigm too of nothing lasts forever except everything is forever.
Yeah.
So and that's what I was just saying about the change of form, like transmute it. Mm-hmm. Even when we talk about clients and trauma, like when we're saying the let it go, that energy is going to be there, but it can be transmuted. Mm-hmm. It can be changed to the light.
Right. Well, it's letting go of that particular vision of that story or that trauma and allowing it to shift and change, right? And so if a client is willing to have open hands and, okay, I had this experience and now the experience can be different for me.
Right.
I can interact with it in a different way from a higher understanding or a deeper level of, what do I want to say? A deeper level of understanding. It's a different perspective of that experience, right? Then the energy that held you trapped can move.
Yes.
Versus keeping you stuck in that story.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's a big self-worth kind of thing, because if I don't hold on to this with those closed fists, clenched fists,
then who am I?
Tight grasp, who am I and what am I without these things?
Yeah.
Emotions, feelings, whatever it is.
Let's find out.
Right.
I say let's find out.
Absolutely. And we have to get into that space of let's find out instead of...
It can be scary and...
Yes.
And we want to find out.
Yes. Because it can be scary and enlightening at the same time.
Well, I think it will be.
Yes.
Right? Not even can be, but will be. Right?
Yes. Yes. That's so good. That was such a great mic drop, don't you think? I do too, because it resonates. Like, it resonated with something that I was just going through, and it resonates with the letting more things in. It's a way of being.
Yes, it's a way of being. And I think that is the difference too, right? Clenched fists is a doing. I have to physically let go. I have to physically hold on. It's a doing, it's an action, whereas the open hands is being, which is our natural state.
It is our natural state. And we were just looking at podcast topics, but this can go with your relationships. We were talking briefly about, like, we might want to include something about relationships.
Oh,
and even if they're fleeting or even if they're long-term, you get something out of them no matter what it is. And I think that goes right along with this open hands, because as a society we're taught, like, those marriage vows. It's a vow. And therefore you have to stay with this person forever, whether you're happy or not, till death do us part.
It's such an antiquated idea.
It is. And if you look at it with your open hands of, let me get what we can get out of this. Like, not just saying, oh, it's not going to work and be done. I'm not saying that, but it doesn't have to be forever. However, you both are forever. So it's incorporating those things into that as well.
And also, even, expanding on that idea, if you approach your relationship with open hands and you're both on the same page, now this is required, both people have to be on the same page of open hands, right? That also allows this person to be who they are and you to be who you are, and for that to flow versus the holding on to, this is my idea and expectation of you and you're not meeting it anymore.
Yes, and I have to change you to fit my needs,
right.
instead
or I
of
have
letting
to change
you
myself to fit your needs, right?
Right.
This open hand sort of philosophy, we'll call it, can really benefit relationships. If you're both on the same page.
It can even benefit if you're not, because you can say, thank you for this interaction, and we can move our separate ways. I still recognize who you are and what you've brought. However, I want to move on. And that's okay too. And that's an open hand part of it as well.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So I will say it once again. Whatever you receive, hold it with open hands.
Thank you for joining us. Please subscribe, like, share, and feel free to leave any comments. This is Natalie with much love and appreciation.
And Marnie in beauty, love, and light. Until next time.